Now
on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
It's 7:06. It's O'Connor and Company on this Tuesday morning. Thanks for tuning in. It's Larry O'Connor alongside Julie Gunlock. Julie, are you like enjoying this? It's like different. It feels different, doesn't it? Now that Trump's in the White House.
Oh, of course. And I am enjoying it. Yes.
And the show is different. I feel like we're like, everything's different.
I know.
Feels great. All right, I'll stop. Coming up at 8:05, our buddy Michael Walsh has a brand new book out. And at 8:35, Julie Kelly will join us. And joining us right now is a friend of the program and a friend of this country. He does a great job as the Grand Poobah at Heritage Foundation. He is, of course, Dr. Kevin Roberts. Good morning, Dr. Roberts.
Good morning, sir. It's great to be on with the greatest radio host I know, and that would be Julie Gunlock.
Yeah,
and I don't know.
Nicely done.
You're pretty good, too.
I appreciate it. I'll take it. Listen, are you enjoying this too? Did you even in your wildest imagination think that this first week of the Trump presidency would go the way that it went? I mean, it was stunning to see, culminating in that remarkable scene in California where he sat in the room with the representatives of everything that has failed about left-wing politics in this country and exposed it for the whole nation. I feel like I'm having an out-of-body experience, Kevin Roberts.
It does feel that way, Larry. In fact, I think you're right about that press conference roundtable in California Friday evening being the culmination of the best first week in the history of the presidency. I really do think that's true. And so even though I had an inkling that there was going to be some serious shock and awe, I did not realize the pace and the scope and the scale would be what it is. And ultimately, that's necessary, right? Because the country really is in that bad of a shape. And Trump understands that he has a limited amount of time, not just 4 years, not just 2 years, but probably more like 15 or 18 months to really take advantage of the moment that he has.
And if you look at the media's had trouble. They don't know where to go. There's, like as you mentioned, shock and awe. They don't know what to focus on. But it seems like they've all sort of decided to gravitate on this, the deportation issue and try to play a sympathy card of sorts for criminals who are in this country, broke the law as their first act of setting foot on our soil, and then continued to break the law. And I think that that's a fool's errand for them, because the last poll I looked at showed 60% of the American populace want all illegal immigrants deported. Forget about whether they're criminals or not. I mean, they're starting with criminals, but 60% are on the side of this story. So what do you make of that? And do you think that this policy is strong and being executed properly to actually, fulfill what President Trump promised?
There's no doubt the policy is 100% correct, because 100% of illegal aliens, by definition, have broken the law when they came into this country illegally. And so the key thing here is that in addition to getting the right men and women for the job, Tom Homan as border czar, Kristi Noem as Homeland Security Secretary, just to name two, he's also selected men and women who are excellent at communication. Think about Tom's inimitable style in the press. Think about Secretary Noem's terrific media presence, but also think about someone like Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller, who refuses to accept the framing of the radical left that somehow there's something evil about this practice. And ultimately, it drives home the following point. J.D. Vance said it well in his owning Face the Nation host Margaret Brennan on Sunday.
Yes.
They are in office. We elected them to the office to represent the American people. And how about, for once in the last half decade, federal policy reflect the will of the American people, but also what is best for them, as opposed to some different set of rules for illegal aliens?
Kevin, you also talk about the role of Congress in this article that I just read, that you talk about how Congress has a role here, from tax remittances to disincentivizing people coming here by permanently preventing illegal aliens from accessing welfare benefits. Tell me a little bit about what Congress can do to make it unattractive to come to the United States.
Julie, the premise of my argument is that if you create disincentives for illegal aliens to come here, that you also will make this whole process of the administration's policy of returning them back to their home countries a lot more successful for this fact. there will be more self-deportations than there will be people who have to be put on, say, the Colombia president's plane to be sent back to Colombia. And so what I argue is Congress obviously has a vital role in this to pass legislation that amplifies the great early work of the Trump administration. And I home in on three things. First of all, just to state something in terms of common sense, illegal aliens shouldn't receive welfare benefits. Secondly, we ought to tax the $150 billion annually of remittances, these payments that go back to home countries. And thirdly, to tell you something, well, the two of you know, but maybe a few in your audience don't know because they're busy doing other things, illegal aliens are able to get home loans in some states. We ought to disallow that practice. If we do all of that, then we create disincentives that really amplify the great policies of the administration. This is also why Congress needs to act quickly, whether it's one big, beautiful bill or two smaller, beautiful bills. They need to home in on homeland security and border security to get this job done.
Well, and it sounds, by referring to one big, beautiful bill or two big, beautiful bills, you're talking about getting a lot of this done through the reconciliation process. And there's going to be some, caterwauling, I think, from Democrats that some of this stuff doesn't fall under the definition of reconciliation. But reconciliation is anything that affects the budget and taxes and revenue to the government. And this obviously has a direct connection to all of those things, right? Do you believe that this? I know with Chairman Jason Smith at the Ways and Means Committee, he's ready to go full speed ahead. But are you sure that the Republicans there, Kevin Roberts, are not getting wobbly, as Margaret Thatcher would say?
Well, I'm never sure that D.C. Republicans are anything but wobbly. So that's kind of an easy question. But in this case, I ought to give, all kidding aside, I ought to give some credit to Speaker Johnson and House leadership, and definitely to Majority Leader Thune, who I think has done an excellent job up to this point. It seems to be very united with President Trump. They're spending more time with him in the House Republican retreat in South Florida as we speak. And ultimately, it's going to require those three men, the president, the speaker, the majority leader of the Senate, to continue to walk in tandem, because there will always be a few members of the House Republican Conference and a few members of the Senate Republican Conference who, shall we say, like to be independent. And the political capital, the political will of the president has got to be spent on this, because, just to make one important point here about timing, if we get to Easter, let's say, and there isn't legislative progress on this one big, beautiful bill, the political will begin to evaporate, and the left, which is really grasping at straws right now, will find a footing for their message. That's a very dangerous spot to be in.
Yeah, very wise political advice there from Kevin Roberts, president of Heritage Foundation. If I could, Dr. Roberts, I think that you were an important voice at the beginning of sort of the resistance to a blank check for Ukraine. And, because a lot of Republicans and conservatives, I among them, my knee-jerk reaction is, okay, there's good people who are being attacked around the world. Cause of freedom, that's a conservative value. Let's go, right? And I think that you were very influential in saying, of course, we support the cause of freedom around the world, but we have to have wise policy, and it's not a blank check from the American people. And I think that helped drive that conversation and got us to where we are today on scrutinizing what's going on in Ukraine. So help me out here. Be a leader again. What's the conservative case for Robert F. Kennedy Jr. as the Secretary of Health and Human Services? Because the man has never met an abortion he didn't like.
Very, very fair question. I would say two things. First of all, in conversations that we at Heritage have had with RFK and that he's had with other pro-life groups, where we are at Heritage on the pro-life issue, we are convinced that he's going to appoint men and women who are much closer to our position than his previously stated position in his career. We accept that as honest statements. And
that's great.
Early on, it looks like that's the case. But the second thing is really homing in on conservative principle. When has it been conservative to do what Big Pharma wants us to do? For me, that's the simplest thing. RFK wants to end the cabal in D.C. of Big Pharma, and it's a close parallel to the big corporate defense lobby that wanted to spend $1 trillion in Ukraine. If you want to break the back of business as usual in D.C., and in this case with RFK, actually have federal policy that improves the quality of health for Americans, he is the choice. He is not perfect. I would prefer that he be 100% pro-life. But I spoke to him a couple Sundays ago about this issue, and I'm convinced, as an ardent pro-lifer, as you know, it's my top issue, that all things considered, he's going to be an excellent Health and Human Services Secretary. And I also, to sum up here, Larry, believe we should always, as Christians, remember the parable of the prodigal son. We ought to welcome men and women back who've been imperfect. We all are, obviously. And I think in this case, over years, RFK is going to emerge as someone very important on all of these issues, including life.
All right. Here's what real leadership is, Julie Gunlock. I'm going to say, Kevin Roberts, that's good enough for me. You give him the seal of approval, then I'm in. That is good enough for me. I appreciate you joining us today, as always.
Thanks, Kevin.
Y'all, both of you are the best. Thanks for having me.
Y'all.